The Lee Monument in Richmond, Virginia, which was unveiled in 1890, will now have limitations on the number of people who can gather around it. SomodevillaGetty images. The state of Virginia imposed strict limitations on Monday on demonstrations at the Robert E. Lee statue in the state's capital, one of the oldest Confederate monuments in the country, after a string of clashes there. Gov. Terry McAuliffe of Virginia announced the emergency regulations, which restrict crowd sizes at the Lee Monument to 500, down from 5,000, and ban guns at permitted events. The rules will also require permits for events there that draw at least 10 people. The regulations came out of a task force set up by the governor in August after a violent white nationalist rally in Charlottesville, VA, where groups like the Ku Klux Klan and neo-Nazis swarmed to protest that city's decision to remove a statue of Robert E. Lee. After that rally, Confederate symbols on public lands across the country faced a new reckoning, attracting impassioned protesters calling for them to be removed and pushing cities to dismantle them, even in the dead of night. The Lee Monument in Richmond, erected in 1890 in the middle of a tree-lined roundabout on Monument Avenue in the capital, has been the site of clashes in recent months. Mr. McAuliffe said he enacted the limitations to protect public safety around the statue after violent protests in August in Charlottesville, VA. Gov. Terry McAuliffe of Virginia created a task force to consider new rules on demonstrations at the Lee Monument. Edu Buyer for The New York Times. The restrictions will balance First Amendment rights and ensure that all Virginians remain safe, the governor said in a statement. He added, "We believe these regulations can be a model for localities across Virginia as they consider how to approach these types of events in the future." The emergency regulations will stay in place for 18 months while the state's Department of General Services considers and finalizes a permanent resolution, and holds public hearings on the topic. The order applies only to the Lee Monument, which is on state property in the city. 5 other monuments on the avenue are owned by the city of Richmond. Mr. McAuliffe's opinion of the Confederate monuments in the state have changed in recent years. 2 years ago, Mr. McAuliffe, a Democrat, insisted that the statues should stay in their places, saying they were all parts of our heritage. But he took a sharply different view after the clashes in Charlottesville, which resulted in the deaths of 32-year-old woman in a crowd hit by a car and 2 state troopers in a helicopter crash. He said then that Confederate monuments should be taken down and urged Virginia leaders to move them into museums. The Lee Monument, a popular attraction and focal point in Richmond, has been a landmark in the city for nearly 130 years. Former SOLRS in the Confederate States Army began advocating to have a monument to Lee in Richmond in the early 1870s. After years of planning, the bronze statue of Lee, astride a horse atop a granite pedestal, was unveiled in 1890 in front of a crowd of up to 25,000 people. Descendants of Lee said in August that they were divided over whether his monuments should be taken down. The war pitted brother against brother and cousin against cousin, one family member said, and we're still at this today.